Hello all, welcome to TechGig webinar. The topic for today's webinar is Software Test Automation, New Generation Approach and Adoption of Technology. We are delighted to have Mr. Rajarama Rao, Senior Manager at PTC Software India as expert speaker amongst us today. Mr. Rao has over 18 years of enormous experience in cross-functional software, product development and discrete manufacturing. He is an experienced hand in building teams and running programs. Gentlemen, with Mr. Rao, we will be having Mr. Ravi Nakula to support him in this webinar. This webinar will continue for 45 minutes and you can ask your questions by typing in the chat pane available. So, without further delay, I request Mr. Rao to continue with the session.
Hello, Mr. Rajarama. We can start the webinar now. I can see your PPT.
Sure. Good afternoon, good evening. This is Rajaram here. I would like to thank all of you joining today's session on software test automation, new generation approach and adoption of technology. I would like to especially thank TechGig for allowing me to present this on this portal and helping to share with the broader community. Today's session I will be sharing along with Ravi Nukala from Coalitia Soft. So in the first part of the presentation, I will be covering various aspects related to making a paradigm shift in test automation with various kind of requirements and strategies that we must be adopting. And in the second part of the presentation, Ravi Nukala would cover about how the technology should be adopted to realize this paradigm shift. So let me go ahead and start the presentation. Okay. Okay, so in my presentation, I will be trying to address following questions, like related to making a paradigm shift in test automation. So what are the various important requirements for making paradigm shift in the test automation? So requirements always come first. And then what kind of strategies we should be adopting to realize these requirements, like how we can overcome various obstacles and stumbling blocks and complex requirements through the strategy. And then, visualizing that we will have an ideal solution in place, how, and also an approach, how we should be adopting that, for a newer test suite development as well as maintenance. Then, I want to touch very briefly on why we should be leveraging on test automation assets. Like, it's very important. And then, finally, I want to share, what are the benefits when we adopt. It's very obvious, but again, I want to share for sure. Okay. So when we are talking about, making a paradigm shift in test automation, there are various driving factors that we should be, considering. And these driving factors essentially formulate the overall contours of the, requirements. And then there would be various other derived requirements in your, approach. The first of all, reducing the dependency on scripting and coding expertise in test suite development. Relying on coding software programming is great to solve a software problem. But can we simplify that is a question. Ideally, we should be able to simplify this kind of situation, and we should be able to reduce the dependency on scripting and coding such that the requirements related to the coding and scripting dependency that normally makes test automation a white elephant to deal with. I think many people who are already in this domain, we normally tend to call test automation as a white elephant because it kind of looks like that, because of all the various problems. And another major problem that with the test automation we deal with that is, we have so much less time and we have so much work to do with the test automation with very few people that the business can afford to fund. So it's kind of very difficult to achieve, and we ideally want to provide so much of our software testing coverage through automation. So it's very important to have this requirement. It's one of the major driving factors to reduce the lead time for new test suite development. And going to the next requirement, test suite maintenance should be another major development intensive activity. Assuming that software would go through some minor changes release after release, we should be able to update the existing test suites for regression testing with a very less effort intensive way, so that we can also predict the timelines accurately, like when we can be ready with maintained test suites and etc. So reducing the lead time for maintenance of existing test suites for new releases is another major thing. And one should always keep in mind that we have bigger ROI from the test automation when we start using the test automation for regression testing. When we start, and then we use we use test suites repeatedly for various builds and until the release. Going to the next thing, we must be leveraging on functional testing consultants for test automation. So typical software testing department normally has resources, trained resources on the application of the testing, who has the knowledge on the functionality and the test scenarios. And there are testing spaces, lean periods during the software development lifecycle, which can be actually leveraged for development of the automated test suites, provided these people can be trained a little bit on the test automation, and such that the methodology or the tool that we adopt, approach we adopt, should be in such a way that it is palatable to such an audience, like such users who can be trained and put into the task of creating the automated test suites. So it's important that we leverage on the functional testing consultants for test automation. And coming to the next major requirement is that typically software test automation development teams, they focus on development of the automated tests for English language, because we first test software in English language. And there are other phases, other teams that would focus on providing the coverage in languages, and we often leave to them to provide the automation coverage in locales because the manual testing scope is with them. But it is imperative for the business success times when we go ahead and so I hope I am audible. Okay.
Hello.
So one must know that we often Yes.
You were not audible for some time, but now you're audible. But there is something in background, some noise.
Yeah,
And
I'm
now
also,
you can
but I
continue.
think no, it's okay. So one must know, okay, one must know that we are duplicating the cost as and when we repeat this automation effort across various languages, separately. So we must integrate that. That is the next major requirement. And when we want to execute the test cases, we want to execute the test cases for a variety of scenarios. That means there is a need for associating variety of data sets for every iteration of the test suite execution. So if you can visualize for a pretty large test suite, it can become a very challenging task to define and maintain the data sets. So that means we should focus on this as another major driving factor while we are pushing for a test automation requirement to parameterize all data input required and also manipulate the data sets in an intuitive fashion so that it can be very effectively used. And there can be a sigh of relief for those people who are executing the tests who are not necessarily automated automation team. It can be the typical manual test engineers or functional test engineers. Then when we actually execute a test case, like for any of the business software, the test cases would invoke certain business objects like UI elements and the tasks repeatedly across several test cases. So it's important that we should be able to very efficiently define and maintain objects and the test tasks. These are the sort of building blocks in test automation. We should be able to define them so efficiently that that would facilitate creation of a library of such object libraries and tasks so that it can be reused across the test cases for a specific application under test. So facilitating reuse of test artifacts becomes the next major requirement. And then coming to the next requirement where the various teams in an organization across the business that they would like to use test automation for their requirements. There are various other processes apart from testing where the automation may be useful. And such people, they want to leverage on the testing artifacts. They don't want to reinvent the wheel every time. So that should be a requirement where we facilitate reuse of test automation assets across the business so that the distributed development teams, they leverage on the centralized test automation team's effort to derive that automation artifacts so that it's a very efficient process. So then going to the next major thing, where we must ideally leverage a large team for realizing the goal on test automation. So there is a need to facilitate collaboration across the teams, across the business for collaboration. So this becomes ideally the next major requirement for test automation to create a paradigm shift. These are the major contours, I would say, from the requirement perspective. And there can be many associated derived requirements. But as long as we stick to these contours, I'll be really confident that we should be able to make a good paradigm shift. So it's important that we should also have a definite concrete strategy. So that would help us to guide on achieving those requirements to create paradigm shift. Strategies always would follow when we have a goal in place. So when I think of strategies, there are various things come to my mind, and the few of them which are important that I would like to share here are that I would like to pursue adopting and implementing an UI-based abstraction layer. I would call UI-based abstraction layer because often, if I say framework, many people would look at that from their own ways, their own perceptions. So it's important we state very clearly UI-based abstraction layer on top of automation tool like Selenium or QTP or various other tools that are currently available in the market. So we should be able to also implement various interfaces that would replace the requirement for coding. In that way, we'll be able to also achieve leveraging on the functional experts and various other business users in the test automation development program. So adoption, implement an UI-based abstraction layer on top of automation tool becomes a great strategy to start with. And then what comes to my mind all the time is that we often focus so much on automating test suites that we often forget about various manual activities goes around defining and maintaining the test suites, pre-processing, post-processing, after during a test case execution, etc. So the strategy should be that we should question every manual step that are undertaken during the entire life cycle of test automation development and execution, that however small or big that may be, so that idea should be there to simplify every manual step, right? It can be even still manual step, but we should be thinking, questioning how we can make it simplify, can we automate that, etc. So let's not worry about just only test cases. There are many other auxiliary functions associated with this that should be questioned and thought about. And then, coming to addressing the needs of localization. We should be thinking, of adopting an approach to neutralize the testing artifacts for using across languages. Like, we should think of having universal test cases that can be, defined once and executed across languages, where, the effort is optimized and it's, from every aspect it is simple and easy to manage. So it's a very important strategy, and it can be a big leverage for achieving the success, adopting an approach to neutralize the testing artifacts for using across languages. Next strategy would be that we should be able to make test suites tool agnostic for execution. When I think of execution of a test automation suite, it can be for a variety of reasons. I think I should be thinking of extracting self-executable test automation suites to various internal or external customers. They can go about executing that without really having the need to know what is the underlying test automation tool and what are the things involved in defining and etc. I think idea is to put everything in a black box and kind of enable extracting of a test suite that can be taken out of this automation system and handed over to the execution folks. Now, going to the next one, where I already spoke about leveraging the test automation. We should be having a strategy to leverage the test automation for various business requirements. I think we should think what are the various processes they look like similar that would help them achieve their deliverables and thereby helping them. So we should be able to actually group such stakeholders and put the requirements together. So that would be the next major strategy, where we should be looking for similar processes, similar to the one that testing team that would typically perform, where the repeated manual steps are involved and etc. That's the next major strategy. And then finally, it's many things. It can one can still go wrong in achieving the overall objectives in an optimal way if we don't think of laying down the processes in a logical fashion and define or maintain the various test artifacts in a very nice intuitive fashion that can help in achieving the overall objective. So it's important to have a strategy to adopt an approach that optimizes the effort requirements in test suite development and maintenance. So we should be able to go through this maze on unknowns and should be able to optimize the things. We should be able to structure and define the various artifacts in such a way that would facilitate the reuse of them across the processes. Okay, so I talked about requirements and then various strategies. I would like to now think of I have a solution available to me. I would allow my friend Ravi Nukala to talk about what is that solution and how it looks like. But let's for some time we'll think that we have a solution at our hand, an approach, that a great approach we have thought of, and how we should go about adopting that test automation adoption for the first time test suite development. So ideally we should go about quickly team formation. We should build the team, we should train them, and then we should always keep in mind that we should establish the process for regression testing and various other test automation deliverables, taking reference from automation artifacts developed for pilot from previous software release. You may already put together group of test suites for previous version of the software. You can even leverage on that to establish a process. So you will not think about establishing a process or fine-tuning the process later when actually you have to perform the work for a new software. So let's think that we should think about the process and leverage on assets that you may have created for the pilot with the previous release of the software or application under test. And then we would like to validate UI-based framework that I talked about is the solution with application under test. So before doing anything else, ensure that you have tested this UI framework for the new release of the software that is under test, so that you are not going to again having a back and forth with your the system development team on various issues. So freeze out on all the issues, uncover all the issues, and resolve all the issues at this stage. And then think of populating reusable automation, object libraries, task libraries, establish logical structure for objects, task libraries for reusability, everything at this time. Focus heavily on reusability. So let's not hurry up in creating objects and tasks that we just end up completing the work, but still those objects and tasks are not yet ready for reuse. That may not be a good situation. We should be able to go ahead and reuse them right after the creation, right? So we can leverage on the functional test team for objects hunting, because these people are aware I think there is some issue. Okay, so sorry that sometimes the audio is going on and off, but I think we can get back as soon as possible. Yeah. So we should be able to leverage on the functional test teams and to hunt for the objects, and then leverage on the test automation team to create the objects, etc. And then once we have quite good number of objects and tasks for undertaking a pilot, we should be able to define scenarios and test cases for one major function area as pilot. Where you can develop supporting artifact based on process requirements, implement, execute automation in couple of locales at this stage itself. Any one European and any one Asian locale, that will help, so that you are testing the entire approach, and you are proving all the objectives for the test automation, etc. at this stage. Once you have achieved the pilot, so sit and review whether we have achieved all the stated goals and objectives, all the requirements are sort of realized, and then take a decision to extend the test automation for all the functional areas that can be automated. So this is the approach that I would recommend, that for a new test case execution. Then at the same time, we should not overlook the maintenance process. Often it is like, okay, we will look at it when it is, when it comes to maintaining. No, we should upfront start thinking about how you're going to maintain, continuously think about that. So here I would recommend a bottom-up approach, like where we first look at various those object libraries, and we kind of validate those objects against the new software release, fix the issues at the stage itself. These objects are very much like unique objects in the library. So optimally, you can put the effort and you can be very creative in achieving this, and ensure that you have a logical structure for the object library that can be used for locating objects in the UI, so that you don't spend a lot of time in locating the objects in the UI, and thereby it will reduce lead time on maintenance, and note down any functionality changes. So as and when you change, you see some issues with objects, it can be a opportunity to note down some functionality changes happening, and that can be an early warning signal to the testing team, right? And then once you're done this, then run the unit tests, fix the issues. So unit tests are very smaller tests where you must have used any object at least once, and fix the issues, so that before you get into execution of larger test suites in a batch mode, it's important you do this, and then run the regression test suites, and then you should be doing the investigation of each failures, and then can generate a report. And this is known to most of the testing fraternity, and they should be understand this. We don't have to really worry about much here, but reaching to this stage optimally is important, and then we should be able to update the test suites and re-execute the test, so that the overall objective of maintenance is achieved in providing the feedback on the regression test. I think at this stage I may want to just start looking at some questions maybe, and I will let me just look at some questions if at all they are there. May I know any automation test tools used for testing iOS applications? So I think I will leave it to Ravi Nukala. Maybe after some time I could quite understand what is this iOS. Okay. What is the best way to select an automation tool, especially when they are paid? Should we call for a demo, or we should ask for a trial version? It's a very good question. The best way to select an automation tool is actually first you review whether that tool matches to all of your requirements, and it is aligned to your strategy. So you have your requirement strategy in place, and then see whether any of these tools satisfy, and then you can call for a demo, and then you can build them further about various other specific requirements. And then there are certain other organizational objectives, like you may want to incur lower costs, so you may want to go for a Selenium based tool, right, similar to that. I'm still looking through some more questions. Which are necessary documents in automation testing? Prasad Bhagwat is asking this question. So the necessary documents would be to look at the test cases from the previous release, because those become the necessary input, and then you should have a good reference on the object libraries and the task libraries, which are intuitively defined and well documented, so that you will be able to define the test in a very nice way. Do you suggest unit testing for test automation code? Yes, I would suggest, because that would help during the maintenance, where you can It's very much part of the maintenance strategy, like you should have unit tests. I think, okay, so I will just go ahead now to cover rest part of my presentation. I want to still emphasizing on the leveraging of test artifacts across the business. You may be very much aware that many users, business users, they are not aware that their processes can be automated. Traditionally testing teams, they are aware. But various other business teams, they may not be aware that their process can be automated. So it's important that, we should collect the requirements for such things. It can be very compelling story to put together the requirement from various business processes requirement perspective. And that can be a compelling story to collaborate and adopt the test automation tools. So that, you will also have achieved a greater, ROI on adopting to this approach and tool. So there are various ways how you can leverage the test artifacts. You can think of, there are similar activities that are done for development of user guides and, revision of the software test training, software product trainings for new software releases. You can think, there are definitely some activities involved which will require automation. And then testing for business processes changes, like the business consultants, going to the customers, you want to actually get a report upfront on what are the things that are changing and where you should go and, fix certain things right away in terms of tweaking the processes at customer end or helping them to understand with some trainings, etc. And validating the product demos. Again, another major thing, that's a very important deliverable that should be ready as and when your new software release is at market, where it can be leveraged very much early in the game. So let's talk about benefits. So if we have stuck to our contours and requirements, and we have adopted the strategy on the test automation, adopted the tool that I talked about, and the approach that we have discussed, I'm sure we are on the road for a windfall gains on savings involved with removing dependency on coding, scripting-driven approach. Resources investment for maintenance gets reduced drastically. I would say that, most of the one-time effort is required when you're creating new test cases. But once they're created, then, it kind of is going to be reduced drastically. And then, obviously, when you have a good strategy in place and, there is a drastic increase in probability of getting ready with test suites for regression testing when they are needed, I think this is something when everybody would love to see that happening from the test automation perspective. Like, we don't want to talk about an lead time when it comes to development of test automation. It should any time become a part of the critical path in any software development. It should be ready when it's required. So I think we will be able to achieve that, and you can understand it will definitely help in achieving a larger goal in an organization. And then there is a drastic increase in the probability of achieving the desired test coverage and quality of the software delivered. So that means there is every reason to believe that business performance can go outside the charts. I think that is very much a reason to believe. And I think I can today very confidently make this statement because we have adopted such a strategy, keeping all those requirements in mind. In PTC, particularly the department where I'm working for, we were having these requirements and strategy, and we were actually grappling with an idea of what we should be doing, how we should be going about developing a tool. So we kind of come across with one company called Qualicia Soft, where when we started interacting, we suddenly realized that we have the same wavelength, we are on the same page. It was an instant click for our partnership to take a shape, and we evolved these concepts together, and I think ultimately Qualicia Soft helped us to get this tool out of the off the shelf, we can say today, and we adopted this tool to realize all of our requirements. That way, I think we are able to make a paradigm shift early. It is possible. So I would like to hand over my part of hand over the mic to Ravi Nukala in a while. Probably I will take a look at some of the questions additionally posted on the portals. So give me a sec. Let me look at the questions. What is the name of most common automation testing tool used in the market in this modern age? I think most of the people like open source, so I like Selenium. I think it is the most common automation testing tool. Now, you definitely need a lot of skill sets in terms of programming and scripting. That's where, this strategy on having a UI-based framework, abstraction layer, that will help in adopting such a commonly known automation testing tool, which is an underlying tool. So in paradigm diagram, you have shown UI-based framework. How do we create a specific UI-based framework? I think Deepankar Bhattacharya has asked this question. I think that is what I was kind of coming to, where I could cover the topic, but I thought Ravi Nukala can be one of the best person who can talk about adopting the technology to realize such a tool, implement such a tool. So I think it will come in a while. When free automation are available, why people are asking for QTP? What is the major difference between these QTP and other freeware? So I think these are the questions that everybody are facing, even including me. I think we had even started a pilot with QTP, and then we had an organizational policy to adopt Selenium because it is an open source product, but then we wanted to have a better framework. So there are specific advantages when you look at from the traditional test automation perspective. But I think with the new paradigm shift that we want to make, I think what is the tool, underlying tool, is of less relevance. I think what is the approach that we are adopting is more important. But then there may be some specific requirement that the business may have, which should look at such tools. I think you need to adopt a way of analyzing the tools. Maybe if you want to follow a process of elimination when you want to select your tools, so such a process will help you. So it looks like I have answered most of the questions, but there are a few more. But I think I have already covered. I think I have occupied my time slot, so I will like to hand over the mic to Ravi Nukala. So Ravi, are you ready? You want to take over from here on?
Hello?
Yes.
Your voice is not coming. Hello?
Hey, this is Rajaram here.
Yes, yes.
I think we should be connecting to. Hello.
Yeah, hello everyone. This is Ravi Nukala from Soft, and welcome everyone to the second session of the new generation approach that we are going to talk about. And I would like to thank Rajaram for giving us a nice presentation on not only the requirements of a classical customer or an enterprise customer, but also the kind of insights that he has given on the entire journey that probably PTC has gone through in terms of test automation. Okay, so now taking that forward, I'm going to kind of step a bit ahead and talk a language which is probably much closer to implementation, probably much closer to the technology side of addressing the challenges, some of the challenges that Rajaram spoke about, or the kind of things that we have done with PTC, in PTC, and kind of learned in the process and kind of adopted into the product as well. So to begin with, there are a few guidelines that I would like to share. Then a kind of sample architecture that I would like to even showcase. So some of my insights of my journey over the last 7 to 8 years of this test automation journey that I would really like to share, and the kind of knowledge that we had gained in building this product called Qualicia. Okay. Yeah. So the first thing that has really helped us, or this might sound very trivial to a lot of people who might begin with any kind of test automation solutions or frameworks or whatever, but what I have learned in these many years of being an architect, and probably spending last 6 to 7 years with test automation as an architect, is you really need to think really big, really broad, to address a spectrum of things that you would like to really like to cater to, which I've seen a lot of organizations, a lot of test automation experts, or for that matter, as I said, even organizations and institutions who have clearly not probably done well because they have not really thought big. By what I mean really thinking big or really being universal is kind of pick up the entire spectrum of problem solution that you are really looking for, rather than looking for a solution which is purely for a application, which is say your application in an organization, say which is say a web-based application, or say a CRM application, or whatever, right? So it's time to go ahead and be more larger, because the kind of effort that we really need to put in terms of creating such a solution or such a framework, if you will, is to really scale that framework across different situations, different propositions, and different challenges that you can really go through in terms of test automation, right? So essentially, when we thought about it, the few things that we could really think about were the kind of variety, the kind of spectrum that test automation has to offer, or the test automation is kind of going to be used. It's going to be used on different kind of, it's not only going to be used on a particular application, say which is a web-based application or any other technology, but it's probably going to be used on, say, a web-based application, and not only on a web-based application, but probably any other web-based application tomorrow, right? So that's the application scaling that you really want. The second part of the scaling that you would really want is not only web-based applications, but what happens to my say client-server applications? What happens to my Java-based applications? What happens to my say Silverlight-based applications, or WPF applications, or any of those kind of other technology applications that you would really want to scale this entire approach or really framework to, right? So that's the technology part of it. And the third part of it, once we started addressing a lot of customers, what we could figure out was a lot of customers are being scattered around in terms of, or even enterprise customers at times are scattered in terms of the teams being more comfortable with a tool called, say, QTP. The other team is more comfortable with another tool called, say, Selenium or WebDriver. And then there are a lot of tools that are coming in nowadays, which people might want to really start adopting and really start using it. The whole approach of the framework and really making it really big is to adopt to all these kind of tools that you can, the adoption to all these kind of tools that you can really make it easy by designing such a kind of a framework. So this thought, this mindset is something that's really critical. Okay, so the second thing, which is extremely critical and which has given us immense success, is the kind of developers, the kind of brains that are there behind developing such a kind of a system. First thing is, I mean, I would probably not insist too much here, but first thing is lot of emphasis needs to be given, or a lot of seriousness needs to be brought into building such a kind of a framework, right? And once the seriousness comes in, once there is a much larger picture that you really have, what you really want to achieve, the immediate next step is to really insist on a development team, right? At times, I have seen pure developers doing phenomenally great work, as even compared to automation developers, for that matter, right? So it's a choice which, I mean, here in Qualisha we have a mix of both the kind of worlds. We have pure developers. We have test automation experts. So we are I think a fusion of a completely mixed kind of a team. But you might also go ahead and kind of look for maybe developers who would want to really think about test automation and building such kind of frameworks, or being contributing into this entire process. And of course, test automation experts. I mean, you would need experts on probably every tool that you would really want to probably think about, right? So that's something that probably, I mean, what I would say is you should probably not even begin without. So if you need to really insist on that kind of a team, and really need to be an expert team, and that really pays really high dividends later. Okay, so now getting into the implementation part of it. So those were some of the earlier guidelines as to how you begin, what do you think, and how big that you see your real picture. Coming to what kind of how you can really segmentize, how you can really modularize or classify the entire test automation story as such. That's really pretty simple, okay? But when you are talking about taking such a kind of an approach, you probably take it step by step. So some of the things that I have really learned in this entire process of architecting an entire product on test automation, which really scales across tools and technologies, is there are certain key segments that you really have to look for and clearly have to isolate and create a complete isolation between them, so that you do not have any dependencies whatsoever. And I'll kind of walk you through what kind of dividends that you can get out of this kind of a thought process or implementation model, right? So there are three things that we are talking about classically for any test automation tool, for that matter, to even exist, right? So any test automation tool would need object. Any test automation tool will need a kind of a workflow, some particular activity, some particular action required on a particular object, right? And it will of course need some amount of data to be worked with, right? Now, in a lot of situations, this framework, you can term this kind of a framework as, say, a keyword-driven framework or a hybrid-driven framework or whatever. I mean, you can page model-based framework, object-based model. I mean, there are tons of different names that people give it to it. But essentially, this is what the three things that you really need to remember. And kind of see that you are isolating these three kind of things. So you have completely isolated object management, you have completely isolated workflow management, and completely isolated data management. Okay. The other thing, the key objective of creating such a framework is, I mean, if you really look at it from a really larger perspective, is not only the automation guy is just creating this kind of a framework, but can I create a framework which is going to be probably usable by anybody tomorrow? Can say a novice test automation guy, can he use it? Can a QVP guy use my framework and probably run tests on Selenium? Can a Selenium guy run tests on, say, a WebDriver or on any other tool for that matter, right? And do I really need experts, or what kind of user base and that I'm really going to look for is another extension that you can really think about and take this solution to a completely different orbit, different level altogether, right? Wherein what we feel, or what we have learned, or what we kind of really very strongly believe in is the functional testers or the manual testers, right? The subject matter experts, the guys who are much closer to business, understand the domain, understand the applications. The way they are able to do their manual testing today, if we as technology experts can build a solution that can be taken by the subject matter experts, and without probably worrying about really what they are really testing against. If they are really doing their tests, I mean, they're given kind of a product, given kind of a framework wherein they can easily use the entire solution. They get the controls that are required. They use the workflow methods that are really required. They add the data, and all of this information is probably part of their day-to-day activities, wherein and they have learned by the nature of manual testing or the kind of testing that they have performed probably over the years. Right, so all that information lies with them. They are the guys probably who have written their manual test cases. They are the guys who understand the domain, right? So we as technology people build this entire set, build this entire structure, architecture, or this entire product or tool or whatever you want to call it, right? And hand it over to these guys and let them do their testing using this completely innovated or renewed way of doing testing, right? And get in as many manual testers as possible into the show, and they can add a huge value. This is what we've really seen and what we really believe and what we really even see working on ground today. Right, so you think of manual testers or subject matter experts a lot because they bring in a lot of information and value. Another pitfall that I have kind of invariably seen in 9 out of 10 frameworks, or you can say 9.9 out of 10 frameworks that I really come across, is the frameworks or the automation approaches, or even if you do, say, right from a simple annotation record and playback mechanism and altering scripts to probably whatever keyword-driven hybrid is, that whatever that you want to really call it, any kind of framework that you really use. The key thing is not the first automation deliverable scripts that you feel that are working or that have passed the round of executions and are giving consistent results. That is where I see the maximum success ratio or the maximum success rate when it comes to teams building frameworks or teams building solutions or architecting them. Right? The key challenge is, how do you address a change beyond the first set of scripts that you have ever delivered, right? Because believe me, that is the major factor which really pulls down the entire test automation showdown. Why? Because the moment a change comes in, and if you have really not done your homework right in terms of building that kind of an automation framework, the change starts impacting in so many places. And at times what happens is the change is probably really very small. Like one of the examples that, one of the requirements that Rajaram spoke about, or PTC had categorically stated as, and we implemented Felicia for PDC was the change in languages, right? You choose any particular language, and can I just switch a language and run my entire set of tests, right? So what's the kind of effort that is really required? So if I build a test in English, do I need any additional effort to move it to a Spanish or a traditional Chinese or any of those kind of Asian languages, Japanese or Italian or whatever? Do I need any additional effort at all, right? So if I'm going to need any kind of additional effort, then again, I mean, it probably runs fine for English, but all the other efforts that you are going to take for other languages are going to be laborious. That's just one single example. Classical examples are any application changes that happen in your next release or in your next version or in your next build, right? And it brings the entire test automation suite and everything crashing down, and you start figuring out which objects have changed. Not only objects changed, but there are new controls or new things that have been added. The existing workflows have been impacted, and so many other things. Unfortunately, what happens, the catch-up activity that we as automation experts really need to comply to the changes, a lot of times happens to be much more than the change itself, and that's where it's the biggest pitfall that we should be aware of, and we should really be really up for it. Yeah. So maintenance is really the key thing. A lot of people have fantastic frameworks, but the real test of a framework is in the maintenance phase. Yeah. Second, another way of extending this entire model of getting a framework delivered which does not need any technology skills, or you kind of completely abstracted it to a level that a manual tester can start now automating tests and doing all those things. Can we get an automation tester even much closer to this framework that we really love? Because if the automation guy really knows all the workflows and the entire automation set of or entire navigation mechanisms and test cases or whatever, right? Can he really start putting down tests in the manner that we really want, or automated using our framework? And can our framework use that pattern, that data, those test cases to actually reverse engineer the entire thing and come out with much more standard manual test cases, which is surely a possibility. Not only a possibility, but it can help big time if you, especially with multiple resources and larger teams, where every person, every individual, every manual tester would have a different kind of rating a requirement. Is a different writer in his own self. He probably assumes a lot of things. Being a manual tester and being on it for such a long time, right? So all those things can really be brought down, and there is a standard way of communication. It's absolutely the vast amount of kind of the minute details that are required in terms of manual test cases. We can actually build the entire manual test case repository if we build such kind of fantastic frameworks. Okay. So with that, I'll just share kind of, this is a very high-level model of what I was talking about, just to give you a much closer view in whatever time that I really have. My main objective is to try and make you touch feel what kind of a framework that I'm really talking about, right? So as I said earlier, so you separate you isolate the entire object. So you isolate the object maps, you isolate the workflows, which is again part of the driver. You isolate the data store that you see on the screen on the right side. So, and then of course, once you have isolated the objects, once you have isolated the workflows, and then you have isolated the complete data store. So the three major components are isolated. You can pick and choose an object. You can pick and choose a set of actions or a set of create a set of workflows or components and attach them to a specific sets of data that you have created, and you would see that your test automation development per se can be amazingly fast, and not only amazingly fast, much more accurate, much less issues to really fix, much less maintenance post your test development of your automation scripts being ready. And not only that, you can really get all of this done by a manual testing team, which is not really worrying about what technology is being used, whether it's Selenium or it's a QTP or an RFT or for that matter any other tool tomorrow, right? So that's the layer that we are talking about. So this is the whole intelligence layer that we are really talking about, which really maps into multiple tools. So either be QTP, RFT, Selenium, WebDriver, or you can choose probably any other tool tomorrow, and which works against the underlying application, right, which you are really wanting to test. So the test engineer for me is the key guy. He can be an automation guy. He can sorry for that. He can be an automation guy. He can be a manual tester. He can be a guy who is probably much closer to business, like larger teams have. It's common to have subject matter experts. Like all of these kind of individuals can start really actively churning out automation tests, right? And an automation tester can probably help out a lot in kind of extending the workflow model, or extending the existing libraries that you have with your frameworks, or helping in terms of analyzing automation tests, helping in terms of creating data environments automatically, right? Or doing your integration tests, all of those kind of things. And that's how an automation guy probably does best what he really does, and kind of is more really technical, right? And he doesn't really bother about what application that I'm testing. Is it is it a financial services application? Is it a sales management application, or whatever, right? So he's more concentrating on the technology stack, and the manual testers are really concentrating on the vertical stack, which is the domain stack, right? So that's the key idea. I hope I have tried to do justice in whatever time that I really have, right? So I'll probably look at certain questions that have been. So there are questions like, could you please elaborate a bit on UI-based abstraction layer on top of test automation tool. A UI-based abstraction layer is it's basically a layer wherein we are really making, as I said, one of the major focus areas for us. The way we look at the entire solution approach, we want to take this kind of a path, or kind of really want to change the perspective of test automation and bring in the subject matter experts or the manual testers, is to have a UI or to have a model kind of created, right, or a product kind of created, or an application created. This framework should be such that it really is very easy to use, and not only easy to use, but it really talks the language of a manual tester. It's not a technology product at all, right? So manual tester should feel like, okay, this is like doing my manual testing, and I kind of put all of these things together, create my workflows, attach data to it, and boom, I'm done with my testing, right? And then he also realizes how much time he can save, how much smart work that he can probably do in this entire exercise, and not be just laborious about going around with those same test cases again and again, which can equally be laborious and really frustrating at times. So I'm not sure whether I'll be able to put in a lot of detail into your question, but the purpose of the UI abstraction layer is that. So it's a layer of UI which really shields the manual tester or the non-technical user from really understanding as to what goes internally, what happens, and how tests are being created or whatever. For him, it should be, okay, how can I pick my object? How can I create my workflow? What kind of data should I create, and how should I attach the data? And that's about it. It should be as simple as that for a manual tester. He doesn't need to know terminologies like, okay, what happens if I get an exception, or what happens if my particular test fails at a particular time, right? Which particular command in QTP failed, or which particular what happened with Selenium? Why didn't it start up? So all those things he's really not bothered about. So that is something that that we as technology guys really stand up for and really deliver that. Okay. So there's probably been a lot of questions. I think we need some more emphasis on this topic, maybe much more detailed one at some later stage. So I have I've rather a lot of questions. The first one that I took was the UI-based abstraction. The second one is, what is the best way to select an automation tool, specifically when they are paid? Should we call for a demo, or should we ask for a trial version? You call for a demo, you ask for a trial version, you do a proof of concept of what you are really looking for. Which are necessary documents in testing? Yeah, I'm just scrolling through certain questions which I probably pick and testing. The paradigm diagram, UI-based framework. How do we create a specific UI-based framework? So, while using the trial versions, how do we estimate the maintenance required in case of constant changing versions and functions of financial software? Which one is most stable? What kind of testing tool we can prefer for a web-based application working only on IE? Okay. So there are a category of questions which are purely on, say, Selenium WebDriver, that kind of thing, and I'd probably take one of those questions. So if you can, if you ask me about, say, Selenium RC or Selenium or WebDriver, today both Selenium as well as WebDriver have their own positions. The way I see it, Selenium, because it's been hugely popular, not only popular, but it's gone for a test of time. But at the same time, Selenium has some kind of issues in terms of, especially because it's completely JavaScript driven. So there are a lot of things which become limitations when it comes to JavaScript, which Selenium has tried to address to a large extent. But still, there are a few issues with Selenium. But that doesn't stop Selenium from being really as popular as that it is. Versus WebDriver, a lot of these issues, especially on SSL layers or secure applications, all that have been very have been rather kind of resolved in WebDriver. It's a much better object-oriented version of implementing a tool as well. So that gives a leverage in terms of if you are really wanting to create a framework on top of it. It's probably a much robust framework that you can really create. In terms of usage, somebody has asked on a question on IE. So in my opinion, IE it performs much better with WebDriver, right? So if that's the kind of context that I can take and can answer that question. Selenium has had issues with IE and has been much slower as compared to all other browsers almost. And the classical reason has been the XPath issue. IE does not have an XPath engine internally built into it even till date, and that's what Selenium relies on heavily, right? So that's where it really messes things up. In terms of WebDriver implementation, it's been much better. I mean, our experience has been much better in terms of IE. Having said that, can you make Selenium work on IE? You can probably work on IE, and there are mechanisms and there are certain fixes or certain things that you can take care of, certain tweaks that you can take care of, certain design regulations that you can be really aware of, and see that if you are already kind of bound to Selenium, the IE browser thing really doesn't impact you much, right? So you can really, there are mechanisms by which you can really bring the Selenium impact on IE really down and can handle it in a much better manner. Okay, so I feel there are, this is probably the time that I probably have. Maybe we'll look forward to a much detailed discussion maybe at a later point in time, sometime when we can arrange probably a successive session wherein more details are provided. Or the other things can be, you can also write into us, or write into me. My mail address will be kind of displayed to you, so you can put forward your questions. And okay, so that's my mail ID. Maybe you can send in those questions, and we can get back to you with as many answers as possible. So that's probably the time that I had. And thank you so much. Thank you everyone who have been listening to me so patiently. Thanks a lot. Hey, Keshav, you there?
Hey, I think we are done. I also would like to thank everyone for joining this session. I think feel free to contact for any details to write to both of us, either me or Ravi. So Ravi, I think Keshav is, I don't know.
Yeah, Mr. Rajarama.
Is it dropped off?
So I think we have answered most of the questions, so we can conclude the session now.
Okay.
Hello. So thanks Rajarama and Ravi. It was really an enlightening session. I would also like to thank our participants for making this webinar a huge success. Recording of this webinar will be made available on techgeek.com by tomorrow.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot. Bye.
रियलिस्ट पाडलिया नाही इथनं वाहताना जिथले लिस्ट पूर्ण